Hi, I'm Mark Cleghorn. Welcome to the Photographer Academy, and today we're doing our Speedlite questions. And so this is one that came in about high-speed sync and why basically does the camera not acknowledge the shutter speed that you want to work at unless you're in that mode. Well, the first things first, I suppose, if we look on the back of the camera, what the question means is that if I wanted to set a working shutter speed of 640th of a second, let's say, yeah, and I'm using a Speedlite on top of camera, as soon as I touch the trigger, this automatically goes to the Canon manufacturer's default for Speedlite. So in other words, why it does that, it's because it wants you to be able to expose the whole of the CCD, the kind of the frame, whatever you want to do with it. In the good old days, it was the film. But it needs to expose it all. And anything above 200th of a second, even though it will record some of the exposure, it can't get across it all. So the intelligence of the cameras today basically minimize you from kind of really being able to shoot at very high shutter speeds without having to think of something like high-speed sync, all right? Basically what high sync means, it just means high shutter speed. So if I was you, if you find yourself on location and you're shooting a lot with flash on camera or kind of slightly off camera, the camera with it, if you need to shoot very high in shutter speed because you want wide open apertures, you're going to have to use high sync, okay? The only problem you got with high sync is that the further the flash is away from the subject and the higher the shutter speed is, basically there's less opportunity to give full illumination to the subject because the flash cannot put its full output out in the curve. Okay, remember flash is an explosion of glass. Flash is an exposure of glass. I'll start again, Mark. So remember that flash is an explosion of gas, okay? And with all things that explode, it gets to a peak and then it falls off. And what the kind of the manufacturer's 200th of a second is, in Canon's sake, is that's the peak. That's the maximum amount of flash that we can see in the perfect time, yeah? Whereas if we're using the high sync, it means it's going to capture just little bits of the flash. And remember, as the flash explodes, it's lots of many thousands of flashes going off at the same time, I suppose. But what you're doing is just seeing a little bit. So if I kind of, I'm in TTL mode just for the ease, nothing else, all right? But it works the same in manual flash. In camera, I'm in manual exposure, as you can see here. I've got 640th of a second. I've got f4, but as soon as I touch this, it goes to the 200th. Why? Because it knows I want to use flash, and hence to get the working exposure, it's going to do it. The only way then for me to do this is go on to the flash. So if we just go on to the flash up here, you usually find through some menus or directly on one of the buttons is going to be sync. In this case, it's this one on menu 4. And now I've got the kind of the lightning bolt with the likes of the H by the side, which is high flash, yes? So if we do the same thing, now you can see that on 640th of a second, the flash will fire and it allow me to work in it. But look, can you see on the screen now the difference in the exposure? It hasn't had enough time to basically do its job, yes? So I either need to kind of heighten my ISO or widen my aperture, or I've got to slow my shutter speed down. So in this case, we're just going to slow the shutter speed down. Let's go to 400th of a second. Remember, we're still in high sync. So this would give us a brighter exposure. It sees more of the flash. Let's do it again, and we'll just come down to the 320th. And we see that little bit more. And then, of course, we go to the 200th of a second, and they're back to where we began. Okay? So remember, as you increase your shutter speed, the camera will fire, and it will fire the flash, but it's not going to see as much of the flash, okay? You've got to get that in your head. So obviously, as soon as you kind of up your ISO, it kind of almost defeats the the object because you're increasing the sensitivity of the camera, and even it doesn't matter how much you put your shutter speed up by, the same equation is going to go on. You're just going to have to widen the aperture or bring the flash very, very close and things really. So as far as the mode, if I just go into the mode a minute, we just go to 1:1. So in ratios, and we'll go groups. Just going to put it back into the 1:1 so you know we're not kind of fixing it. So let's look at the 200th of a second first on the back of the camera here. So this is the evenness in ratios for a light from left to right. As I start to increase the shutter speed, go to 400th now, we'll see it slightly darker because it can see less of the flash. And again, once more, 1, 2, 3, another full stop. It's getting darker, 1, 2, 3, full stop. So you can see, even though we can shoot with it, it basically is going to mean that we're going to have to do something within the equation, like bring the flashes closer, take some of the diffusion off, kind of zoom in the flash, do something within the image itself to try and make a difference. So just by allowing the light to be closer to the subject now, we can start to actually record more of the actual flash itself. So high speed sync brilliantly. However, remember, it's not going to perform like it usually does in normal sync mode. So high speed sync, as soon as you want to shoot above 200th a second, 320th, 400th a second, combined with ambient light in the scene, it's not a problem. Much above that, you can see you've got to actually start to strip away the light as far as the softness and everything else is concerned, and you've got to get it close to the subject to allow it to try and gain its correct exposure. Hope you enjoyed this film. See you on the next one.